all that glitters is not gold. I've got a story on this theme. It's very literally connected to this idea of gold. It's about when I worked for the Olympics in 2008 in Beijing. So, gold medals. And I worked at the time for McDonald's. So, golden arches. I was 24 years old, and I got this job when I had just started out as a translator-interpreter living in Beijing for the top executive team of McDonald's, because McDonald's was one of the global sponsors of the Olympics. So they hired a hospitality company, and the hospitality company assembled this team, and I was on it, and I was responsible for helping these guys get around, pick them up from the airport, take them to the venues, take them to press events and nice dinners, and the Great Wall. And I knew when I got this job that there were some problematic aspects of the Olympics. I knew that whole neighborhoods had been bulldozed to make rooms for the venues, and that the people had been displaced. They hadn't all been fairly compensated. There were rumors that the authorities in Beijing were kind of gently ushering the activists and journalists and certain migrant workers and mentally ill people out of the city. The whole slum neighborhoods had been walled off so they couldn't be visible from the highways, and that stray dogs were being rounded up and euthanized. I'd read the news, so I knew these things, but I thought, I'm not personally going to euthanize any dogs. And, I'm working in the capacity of a linguist. Like, I'm helping these people communicate. You speak Chinese, you speak English. I'm just the bridge of communication here, and my hands stay clean. That's how I thought of it, at least. But it's not exactly how it worked out. So I'll set the scene for you. It was like 5 or 6 days in the Olympics, and I was walking out of the National Aquatic Center with the CEO of McDonald's and his wife. It's the water cube, the cube with the glowy panels, and it was beautiful, it was nicely air-conditioned, it was this brand new facility, and we'd just seen Michael Phelps set a world record and win a gold medal. It was this one. He did this one. Faster than anyone ever done it before. It was fantastic. He's like this beautiful dolphin man. And we walked out of the water cube into the sultry Beijing afternoon, because it was August, and Beijing is very hot and humid. And we walked out, and there's this place where these cars were supposed to be for the VIPs, it was just us, and the car was not there that was supposed to pick us up. And the CEO of McDonald's and his wife kind of look at each other, and they look where the car is supposed to be, and they look at me, and they're like, "So Daniel, what's the plan now?" And I looked at them, and then I looked at my watch, and I was like, "Oh shit," because it was 4 p.m. And here's the thing, these cars were provided to us by the Beijing Olympic Committee. These were these beautiful, we had 3 of them, beautiful black Audi A8s with tinted windows and leather seats and very good air conditioning. And they had a special credential so they could pull up right to the Olympic Village and the venues and the Grand Hyatt where these VIPs were staying, just like the green zone. Like, you couldn't just easily come and go. Like, it was literally guarded by tanks, the Olympic Village. And the cars were driven by volunteers. So even though the people of Beijing were like kind of getting a raw deal with the Olympics in some ways, 100,000 volunteers had been successfully recruited, people who wanted to represent their city and their country in this big spectacle for the outside world. And 6 of them were assigned to drive these cars for us. So 6 drivers, 3 cars, and that means that there were 2 shifts. And the shifts began and ended at 4 p.m. And we knew this. We had gotten ahead of it, right? That my boss, this Australian lady named Maggie, she said, "Tell the drivers they have to change out the cars when we're doing something. So if we need a ride to fencing at 4, they pick us up, they take us to fencing, we'll watch the fencing, and then they change out the car then." And so I told the drivers that. I said, "Maggie says this," and most of them were like, "Yeah, okay, fine." But one of the drivers, his name was Lao Zhang. He was the eldest of the drivers. Lao Zhang literally means old Zhang. And he was this dignified chauffeur. And he said, "Well, I don't work for you." And the depot where we change out the cars all the way across Beijing, you see that's they serve us food at 4 p.m. It's for the volunteers, because that's when all the drivers are there. So I'm just going to keep changing out the cars at 4, and we'll work it out. And so when I was standing in front of the water cube and looking at my watch, I was realizing that the guy who was supposed to pick us up at 4 was Lao Zhang. So I called him, and I said, "Hey, Lao Zhang, where are you?" And he was like, "Oh, Daniel, 不好意思，我在路上," which means, "Pardon me, I'm on the road." And for some context, like Beijing traffic was really bad back then. It was so bad all the time, like not just at rush hour, it was always awful. And so there was actually a joke at the time that if someone was late to a meeting and they called you and they said, 不好意思, pardon me, 马上到了, that means I'll be right there, like I'm arriving immediately. That meant you had like 30 minutes until they would show up. And if they called you before your meeting, they were like, 不好意思，我在路上, which is what Lao Zhang said to me. That means, pardon me, I'm on the road. And that means it's like, okay, 45 minutes, an hour. And then the other thing they might do is they might call you up at the time of your meeting and say, 不好意思，问题不大. No Mandarin speakers here, okay. So, 问题不大 means the problem is not major. If someone says to you at the time of your meeting, the problem is not major, it means we're going to have to reschedule. It's a euphemistic way of speaking. I mean, everyone did this. They were embarrassed, but it was accepted because the traffic was so bad. And like some additional context, like the traffic was bad because in Beijing at the time, there were 1,000 new cars on the streets every day, like including weekends, for 10 years, the whole decade of the 2000s. 1,000 new cars a day for 10 years. So it's not like they weren't building new roads. Like all night long, they got the Klieg lights and the cement mixers and the flaggers. Like new roads guys were on it, but you can't keep up with that rate of growth. And we all know the story of that growth, the Chinese economic miracle. That was like what was going on. The communism had been real rough, didn't have any money, and they were making money really fast, and we were their partner. At the time, there wasn't all this name-calling and finger-pointing that we have now, and China stole our jobs. It's bullshit. That's not true. That's not what happened. Right? China made a better offer. And the CEOs and the shareholders and the board members, they preferred to manufacture in China than to manufacture in the United States. Right? China said, look, you guys have unions. We don't do that anymore. We can, there's no like overtime concept. Everyone's super poor. They're looking for a job. There's a lot of subsistence farmers. We will burn coal in filthy, polluting power plants around the clock to power factories for your manufacturing, if you like, no big deal. And then everyone in the United States, the multinationals, they're like, yeah, for sure. We don't want to do this Rust Belt stuff anymore. Send them over. But this is true, right? I mean, this is the big thing that happened so far this century. I mean, like, it's huge. This huge economic shift. China got the money, they got the pollution, they got the jobs, and we got really cheap stuff and unemployment and crankiness and clean air and clean water, all this stuff. And so cars were pouring onto the streets of Beijing, and the traffic was really bad, but the whole point of the Olympics was to celebrate that. This was something we were all doing together. The slogan of the Olympics in Beijing was 同一个世界,同一个梦想, which means one world, one dream. It's very Olympics, right? Faster, stronger, higher, together. And they were all about it. They euthanized all those dogs just for this beautiful spectacle for everyone. They did the biggest torch relay ever. They lit it in Athens. They ran it through London. They ran it through Paris. You guys remember the news. It was like a rugby match. Like the Tibet protesters were like trying to tackle the guy with a torch. They ran it through the United States. We were down. They ran it through Australia, all through Asia. They ran it up to the top of Mount Everest. Bing, took a selfie, ran it back down, and all through China, into the big arena. They ran it around. The biggest, most spectacular opening ceremonies ever. George W. Bush was there. It was the first time a sitting American president had gone to the Olympics for the opening ceremony. I mean, we were in it. We were in it together. He was probably just eating candy and not paying attention to us. He was there. And then they lit the torch, and they played this music video. It was on the TV all the time. It was all the pop stars, the biggest pop stars in China, standing in front of the different monuments of Beijing, Temple of Heaven, Ming Dynasty tombs, sing Beijing welcomes you. And then the chorus comes. It's Jackie Chan himself. He's standing on the Great Wall dressed all in white, being filmed by a helicopter, and he sings, 北京欢迎你，为你开天辟地, which literally means Beijing welcomes you, 为你开天辟地. For you, we tear across the skies and rend the earth. And it's like, damn, Jackie, thanks. You really went the extra mile there. You even rent the earth. But could we have the cars at 4? We need a little more. We need the cars at 4. You don't even have to rent the earth. Just give us the cars at 4. And that was how I was feeling in front of the water cube for like 45 minutes to an hour, while Lao Zhang navigated Beijing's traffic, and he came to pick us up, and he got there after about an hour. We got in the car. He gave me this look like, oh, hi, Daniel. I gave him this look like, we're going to talk later. And we drove back to the Grand Hyatt Hotel, just a few blocks from Tiananmen Square, right in the center of Beijing. And I went up to the headquarters of the hospitality company. And I saw my boss, Maggie, and I told her what had happened. And she was like, Daniel, you're supposed to resolve that problem with the drivers. You're supposed to tell them to just do it at a different time. How come this can't happen? We'll lose our contract. It's not acceptable. And I said, well, I told him what you told me to tell them. And look, this guy, he doesn't work for us. He's a volunteer. And he's 50 years older than me. We're in China. He's my elder. And I'm an outsider, and he's from here. It's really lame for me to be telling him what to do, and he's not listening, so it doesn't work. And she said, well, you have to make it work. That's your job right now. But I solved the problem of them going back to the depot for food. And I said, oh yeah? And she handed me this stack of vouchers, $5 vouchers for McDonald's. She said, here, take this. And after every shift, you can give one of these to the driver. And then they don't have to go back to the depot to eat because they can eat McDonald's. Eh? And I said, okay, Maggie, I'll give them the vouchers. And I took the elevator down to the basement of the parking garage of the Grand Hyatt Hotel, where the 3 drivers on that shift were waiting. And I explained, I said, hey guys, great news. I got these vouchers. So at the end of every shift, you can have one of these $5 vouchers to McDonald's. In fact, you can have 2. You can have 2 of these $5 vouchers to McDonald's at the end of every shift. So that way you don't have to worry about eating at the depot. And 2 of them were like, yeah, okay, man. It's just a couple weeks. Why not, But Lao Zhang, he refused. He was like, I am not poor or drunk, so I will not eat at McDonald's every day. I'm just going to keep following the rules of the Beijing Olympic Committee, for which I volunteer. And I lost it. I lost my cool. I started lecturing this guy. I said, look, Lao Zhang, you don't understand. This is the CEO of McDonald's. They're one of the global sponsors. And didn't you listen to Jackie Chan? This is really important. You can't leave this guy waiting outside the water cube, and sweating. He's the CEO. And, don't you want to represent Beijing? And how are China and the United States going to get along unless we can't resolve these silly differences and compromise? And he just looked at me and smiled and shook his head, and he walked away. And I never saw him again. I don't know if he quit. I don't know if Maggie made a call or something happened. But he was not there. And we didn't have any further problems with the 4 p.m. car thing. And I didn't quit. I didn't feel good about it, but I stuck it out. This was like a big job for me. But that conversation, that situation really nagged at me. It really ate at me. I didn't like being that bridge. Whatever bridge that was, I was not into it. And I left Beijing a few months after the Olympics. And I moved back to my hometown, Portland, Oregon. But the conversation still nags at me. Every time I opened up the tap and I poured myself that good Oregon drinking water, it's just fine, right out of the tap. And I swam in the clean rivers, and I looked at the blue skies, and I went to the stores, and I bought the cheap Chinese socks and toaster, everything. Everything was made in China. And sometimes I thought about Lao Zhang. I thought about, the water that he was drinking and the air that he was breathing. And the feelings of pride and identity that had led him to want to volunteer for this big thing, the Olympics. And those same feelings that stopped him from bending to the will of this powerful multinational corporation. And how I hadn't had that same will, and the same feelings. And I thought about how we're connected. And that's when I started writing my first novel, which is called Beijing Payback. And it's about those connections, those invisible threads of power and history and capital that tie us all together. And behind the facade of the big glittery spectacle, there's this dark side. And I love this metaphor. All that glitters is not gold. Because everyone knows who plays with glitter. It gets everywhere. It's really hard to contain glitter. It really is. It's just glitter. You can't get rid of it, right? And that's what's happening. And all of us who are participating in this super dangerous, toxic, failed experiment of globalization. It's like we all have some of this glitter on our hands. And of course, by glitter, I don't mean glitter.